YouTube viewers and subscribers. So for no specific reason, I have never really featured too many K&B engines on my channel, nor have I actually even owned that many of them either. And there's no reason really other than I just, for whatever reason, just didn't happen. But K&B engines has been around for many years, and it wasn't until the last few years that John, a good friend of mine, John, a contributor to the channel, has informed me and has sent me some K&B engines. And through a lot of research and some reading, I found that K&B actually in the 70s, 60s, 70s, primarily the 70s, was really probably about the premier American-made engine manufacturer for competition and boat engines. And they made some very good ducted fan engines, some smaller pylon racing engines. That sort of changed in the late, say the mid-80s, with the Sportster series of engines that came out. Now this was a departure for K&B at the time because most of those other competition style engines were very specific for a specific task. And what K&B decided was to open up or produce a line of engines that it had a wider appeal, more for the sport modeler, because the hobby was really growing at that time. So that's kind of how the Sportster series arrived. Now I have on the bench today the first time I've ever had a K&B 65 Sportster, and this is an engine I got from a friend of mine, Jeremy. Now this particular engine, the Sportster series engines started with the 20 Sportster, and I think that came out like 1986, and then followed by the 45 Sportster in about 87. This 65 came out in 1988, which coincidentally is the same time I was involved in the hobby. At that time, the only experience I had with any of these K&B engines, in particular the Sportster engine, was my next door neighbor and best friend. We started in the hobby at the same time. We were both in the military and lived in a duplex. So he happened to buy a K&B 20 Sportster engine, and I happened to buy an OS 40 FP, I think is my first engine. So I was doing the OS thing and he was doing the K&B thing, and he always had really great success with that engine, and it was very quiet and it ran well, but for whatever reason I really wasn't taken with the K&Bs at that time. But this 65 Sportster from Jeremy comes to me. He was getting rid of some of his engines, and this is an unrun, never seen fuel engine, and yes, I did do my sniff test on it and I verified that, and it came to me exactly as you see here, with the exhaust, the two-piece exhaust, and of course the long screws and the carb. Now some of the interesting things about this engine is, even though it is an economy engine, and I think the offering price for this when it came out in '88 was like $99 is what the review said. This does not feature any ball bearings at all. In fact, it doesn't even have bushings or bronze bushings as a bearing surface. This is made with high silicon content aluminum, and that in and of itself is the bearing material. So if I remove this, and if I get this washer off, you'll see here this crankshaft actually just rides right in the crankcase itself without any kind of bronze bushings either. The other thing that's interesting about this engine design is it comes with this threaded stud, so that in an event of a crash, you bend that stud or break it, you can just replace that. So this engine is also not an ABC engine, nor is it ringed. What they do, and I read this in the articles, or review articles on this is actually a chromed piston. So the entire casting is a high silicon content aluminum, and then they just chrome plate the piston. So it's neither ABC nor does it have a ring, which makes these a very unique engine, and I'm really excited about running this engine for the first time. Now from the reading I've done, I find also that these tend to be, they're kind of called, I think it was Clarence Lee or somebody who called these things the poor man's four-stroke. They tend to like larger prop sizes and turn lower RPM. And like I said, this isn't really a speed burner or one of those high performance engines. It's actually designed specifically for the Sunday Flyer, the Sport Flyer, as a very inexpensive and economical engine just to run every day and since it doesn't have ball bearings in it, there's very little issues with worrying about rusting of bearings and replacing of bearings. So it's going to be interesting to get this on the stand. I'm going to read up on the fuels it likes, and I was reading this is a K&B plug, but I kept seeing that they would always run it with a K&B idle bar plug. I believe I have one of those on hand, but this is a non-idle bar plug. So I'm going to get this on the stand here very soon, start the break-in, and then we'll get some other runs with it. So you got another K&B engine, and I've only had probably less than a handful K&B engines total that have been mine personally, and I still have a 20 Sportster, and so this should be an interesting one to run. So thank you all for watching.